Hey guys, welcome back to another interview. I'm Guido and I've got Juris today. So hello Juris, the suggestion to me from the community was instead of just doing all CCs, and I'll move through all the CCs and that kind of thing, is also get other personalities that are in the game. And Juris is one of our forum regulars on the Watt NA forum. So he posts a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff in there, very good player. Clan, is it Yujo, is that right?
UJ these days, yes.
Clan Yujo. So say hello to everybody, Juris.
Hey everyone, nice to be here, and thanks Guido for the opportunity to talk to you about my favorite game of all time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you. I think this is actually pretty cool because I interviewed. He's a friend of mine, Pilgrim, but I called him the Common Man. You may have saw that. You guys may have seen that one. But now we've got Juris from the forum, and so we're going to primarily talk about the forum. We're going to talk about World of Tanks though, because obviously both of us really like this game. It's really cool to put a face with the name. You know what I mean?
Uh,
Sometimes you're surprised, like you're like, okay, wait a minute, that's not exactly what I thought I would see with that guy right there. So we'll just get started here. So you said favorite game of all time. So let's just start from the very beginning of this. Why? Why is it your favorite?
so if I had to think about that, I think I could give a couple answers. I think one has been, and I think maybe it's a combination of the no respawn, so you have to be more deliberate and considered about how you spend your health and what you do, because at least on a per game basis you only get one. I think the 15v15, and we can talk about maps that make us crazy, but I think the general 15v15 in the on the larger maps is about a perfect number of opponents and friends, so you cover everything. You're never really in the position where nothing happens and you can't find anything to do, but it's not totally frenetic. And because it's all PvP, the replayability is almost infinite, right?
Right. Yeah.
I still, even I'm trying to remember when I started. I think I started playing maybe in late 2013, and even today, right? I'll see someone in a super old school tank, so it's a tank that I've seen the entire time I've been playing the game, and even on a map that I've played the entire time, and I'll still see people do stuff 7 years later that I've literally never seen anyone do before. You think, wow, I never thought to drive an E100 there. You know what? I guess I'll try it. It
Yeah.
worked out better than I thought. So I think it's something like a combination of those things. And I guess the other piece of it is probably the chunks in which you can consume. So something like Civilization, which is another game that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
But it has that it kind of sucks you in, right? And
Yeah.
it's really hard to play
One
only
more
10 minutes.
turn.
Right, right,
One more
right, right.
turn.
One more turn, so it's really hard to
Holy
play
shit!
only
It's
10
it's
minutes.
5 a.m.
Right, right. I think we've all had that experience, right? It was like, oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
God, where did the last 3 days go? Yes, I have this amazing Indian civilization, but I'm now, I haven't talked to any other human being for the last 48
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
Whereas tanks is great, right? Because you can, if you have 10 minutes while the baby's asleep, it's like, okay, I can log in, I can play one match, and I can walk away and do it later. So I think
Yeah.
it's all those things together, but it makes it very replayable, and of course it strongly encourages you to get better at it, as I know from
Yeah.
all the things that you've done. It provides lots of opportunities for incremental improvement.
So you just mentioned the 15v15, and usually you're going to find people and it won't be too boring. That actually made me think 7v7 thing, the brawl. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
on that?
So with the caveat that I've not played it yet, but
Oh,
I,
okay.
I've watched some other streamers play it.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely an interesting idea, um, and it might be on. I think on the smaller maps it works really really well, right?
Right.
Because then
Yeah.
you still so on something like Prokhorovka or Malinovka, it can probably get a little bit slower paced than you might like, because it's such a vision heavy map. But on the small to medium maps, it works really well. And I think I was watching maybe Skill for LTU or something, but they were playing on Siegfried Line, and
Right.
it actually worked. And that was, I think, an example of a map where it worked really well, even though the map's bigger, because there's not a lot of soft cover for the most part. And so you can still spot people, right? You're not
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
position where you're just trying to find unspottable tank destroyers on the red line, that are behind three bushes. So it seemed to work pretty well, and so I'll be interested to see where they go with it, because I think it's a good idea for variety. They might have to tweak, which maps appear in the rotation, or how the spawns work.
And I'll tell you what I found is it's it's even more team dependent than the 15v15. And the reason I'm keen on this is exactly what you said. I never really thought about it, but it's a great thing that you just mentioned about 15 on the size of the maps you have is enough to kind of get around the map and get an idea what's going on. In the 7v7, what I have found is if you don't stick together, you get destroyed in detail piecemeal. You know what I mean? If the other team
Right.
comes together as a glob, and that happens in 15v15, but at least there's enough players and time you can kind of react. On 7v7, you're in trouble if you're not all together.
Right. And what it reminds me of is the early days of the strongholds, especially the tier 6 strongholds, right? Because
Oh,
that's kind of
right.
how they
Yeah.
that's almost invariably how they worked, right? Is the 99% of the time the winning strat was blob of 6 tanks goes here, one offside spotter goes there, and if the other team hasn't done the same thing, you just basically win, 90+% of the
Right,
time
right, right.
because you have this giant clump of massed firepower.
Right.
And as you say, right, in 15v15, even if you have 6 tanks, well, you might have 6 tanks that have Overwatch on where you're going, and so you're going to get shredded. But if you only start with 7, right, well, you're not going to have 6 on Overwatch
Yeah.
unless you just luck right into the worst possible place, right?
Yeah.
You're going to hit 2 or 3 tanks with 6, and even if they have an initial advantage, it's going to evaporate pretty
It's
fast.
it's the team meat shield thing. While you may not try to do that on purpose, it happens just via having enough guys around, and so you have a little extra breathing room. But now I'll tell you what, that 7v7, if you're not on top of it quick,
Right.
it goes down. It goes down badly. All right, so we said we talk a little bit about the forum on this. One
Yes.
of the things that I kind of came to this doing the CC thing initially, and it wasn't necessarily that I was trying to be a CC. It was just I was looking at it going, I think people could use some help on getting better at the game. And one of the places I aimed at, which a lot of people told me I was being stupid about, because I was like, let's try to make the forum a little better.
No,
Because
I,
it
I
could be
think
the Wild West in the forum, man. I mean, what?
it really can. Well, and I think the reason that I like contributing to it is a very similar one to yours, right? Where I read a lot of stuff, and I think about when I was a new player, right? And some of the terrible, terrible, terrible ideas I had about it. Like I can remember complaining loudly in a match when I first got my T29 and I had it deleted, and I was complaining about what a bad tank it was. And now I think back on that and I feel like that is the dumbest thing possible to say. Like it's arguably the best tier 7 heavy tank that's
But
ever been
didn't
in
you
the
just
game.
go through that little gun though? Did
Well,
you know
so
what I mean?
fortunately, right, exactly. So at least someone had the sense to tell me, like, hey, by the way, don't play it with the 76
Oh
millimeter.
God,
Like,
I
save
did.
some
Yeah, I
save
did.
save some
Yeah,
free experience and buy the 120. So I had no
yeah,
excuse, right? I had a fully eluded T29 with the good gun, and I still thought it was terrible. So
yeah,
obviously I was, but yeah. So my experience was, and I don't know if you knew the Watt Labs forum, but
yeah,
but I started there and thought, oh, like here's some really useful information. And then even on the main forum, but I thought, well, that I had a lot of people help me as I came from a dark red player to a reasonably good one.
yeah,
And so I always viewed contributing on the official forum as kind of a way of giving back a little bit of that.
yeah,
And hey, these are the things. And I think that you've seen, but I have that long guide about when to cap and when to go back and reset. And I figure stuff like that is not that everybody always listens, but if even one person listens, right, then
right.
that's a person who enjoys the game more, and even if their teammates don't know it, their teammates enjoy it more because their teammates are going to win more often than they would
Yeah.
if the person hadn't invested the
You know,
time.
it's interesting that you talk about Watt Labs, because what was the guy's name that hated Garbad?
Oh
When I
yes,
started paying attention to getting better, I mean, I went literally 20,000. I was still a 49% player at 20,000,
right,
and I started looking around for help. And Watt Labs was one of the places I found, but Garbad was still active on the official forums, and it was way worse. If anyone thinks the official forums is a
right.
mess now, and I'm not saying anything, I'm not trying to blame him or anything. I'm just saying he had very specific ideas about things,
Oh yes,
and
yes
it
he did.
was just flame war after flame war on this, and that actually got me over looking at Watt Labs. My only issue with Watt Labs is the salt level is extreme, so
Yes,
if you're gonna dip your toe in that pond, you're gonna have to wash your toe. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Because
right. No, that was
but
absolutely true.
but you are going to find some of the best players in the game and some of the best advice. It's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit, but there's still some active there, and you will find a lot of great info there. I wanted to take some of that, less the salt, and try to get
Yep.
it over to the official forums. And a lot of those guys don't want to do it because, frankly, and they're right, there's a lot of people on the official forums that just don't want to hear it.
Right.
You know what I'm
And
saying?
and it's funny you bring that up because I had to laugh because there was a thread earlier, maybe late last week on the official forums, and I can remember so long ago. I think maybe the original time that I posted the guide about how to cap and when. I had a long discussion with someone on the forum, and I won't call out any names because that's definitely not called for.
Yeah.
But the discussion was to this: there were some people complaining, as they like to do, about I get so mad when people go chase the last bit of damage instead of capping, and it means that I lose the game. And I said, well, yeah, that's annoying, and I don't disagree that it's annoying, but on the other hand, I don't really get mad about that, and the reason I don't get mad about it is that sitting on the cap isn't going to make you a better player in most senses, right? Whereas if you go and try and chase down the last few tanks, you can practice a whole bunch of things in a very, very low leverage kind of way, right? You can
Right.
practice making sure that I spot them before they spot me. If there's more than one of them, I can make sure that only one of them can even possibly shoot me at a time. I can make sure that I have hard cover available while they don't. I can make sure that if they're going to try and expose to shoot me, they also have to expose to a bunch of my teammates and take and make bad trades. And so the point I was trying to make was that, hey, these are all skills you can practice. Like the end game, if you practice those skills in a very low leverage situation, well, now your chances of doing those skills right in a high leverage situation, when now it's two of you versus five of them, right?
Right.
If you haven't practiced those skills, the chances you're suddenly going to do them right when you're thinking, oh my god, I've only got 300
Yeah.
health left and I'm a one shot to everybody and I gotta feel like it's zero, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one game in 100 you're going to do it right, 99 times you're going to die, right? And so my point was that it's a little bit annoying to lose that one game where arguably they should have capped instead of chasing, but on the other hand, maybe think about it as an opportunity. And this person just must have had 10 or 12 posts. It's like, no, what are you using? Just chasing down zero health tanks. Yeah, what could you possibly learn by doing that? And then, so it was a long time ago, 2 or 3 years, right? And then finally, last week, I see there's some new player, right, who said something appropriately uneducated, let's say. And there's a whole bunch of people yelling at him about like, no, this is silly. Like you're thinking about this all wrong. Here's the right. And lo and behold, it's that very person that I had that argument with is now more or less arguing my side of the argument. So
Yeah.
that was and that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
to like give some people the tools to get better and enjoy it.
What I love about this, one of the things I love about this game is the tight tolerances of percentages we live within, especially for win rates and really everything. The difference between it. But you just mentioned, you said that one game in '99. What people don't understand is that's a percentage point of win rate.
That's right.
That one game that you did it right in because you did all that practice. In the
Right.
past, you weren't able to carry that game. Holy cow! 1 out of 90, 1 out of 100 is a percentage point. That's significant.
That's right. And that's I think where people they both get too caught up in and not caught up enough in a one game sample, right? So they'll
Yes. Yeah.
and I think that was actually what the discussion. So it was a
Yeah.
discussion. So someone was saying, "Oh, I played 10 games and my win rate was only 30%, but I did all this damage. That means win rate is crap." It's like, well, no, it doesn't. Like, there's still a correlation. The correlation is just weaker. Like, but so now look at 10 series of 10 games, and now you're to 100 games. Now the correlation's a lot stronger. And then
Right.
look at 10 series of 100 games, and now the correlation's really strong, right?
Yeah.
And people want to think that there's I mean, yes, improvement is linear, but I don't know, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective because I know you've had a similar path through the game. But for me, the improvement, it's not linear with a constant slope, right?
No.
It's sort of linear with a very low slope, and then all of a sudden a bunch of things that you've kind of been doing right, you suddenly start doing enough of them right at a time that you get sort of a sharp step function.
Yeah.
And then you do the same again where there's very
Yeah.
slow improvement, and then there's that in some ways that can hide the improvement, right? Because you're doing all this stuff and you're like, oh man, I'm not getting any better, what's going on?
I hear that a lot, actually. Yeah.
And so at some point I feel like I should go back and chart my own progress, because I feel like if we go by WN8 or something like that, but I feel like I probably hit at least 4 plateaus overall
Yeah.
in growing as a player.
And each subsequent plateau is going to be harder and harder to improve on.
Right.
The better and better you get, it's going to be harder. And it really what happens here, and the way I see it anyway, and the way I teach it, or at least attempt to teach it, is I'm going to give you some tools to preserve your vote longer in the game. You need to live
Right.
longer. And when you
Right.
live longer and you get to that mid to early end to late end, each one of those kind of phases, you've got early game, mid game, late game, but there's some phases in between that. Every time you get to that part of the game gets harder and harder,
For sure.
depending on what you've done and what your decisions are. And if you go, all right, now I'm living to mid game, but holy cow, I'm plateaued and I can't get past it. Well, that's because you've never been there, or you
Right.
haven't been there enough. And now
Right.
you're learning what to do. You're like, oh, my damage is up, but my win rate's not going up. Well, it'll come because
Right.
you're learning what to do with your vote that you were preserved longer, and in the
Right.
past you didn't have it. And that's really hard for people to understand. They just want to see I'm getting better, 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 better.
Right, and it just and I think that was even the thing on the forum where it was like the person didn't even understand that, like, oh, I'm doing more damage, why am I not winning more? It's like, well, because you were playing tier 5 tanks before and now you're playing tier 9
Well,
tanks, and
there's
yes,
that too. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. Like you're now doing 800 damage in a tier 9 versus 600 damage in a tier 5. But I'm doing more damage. Why am I not doing better? Well, because the average damage required at tier 9 relative to to have the health is much bigger than that, right?
It,
If you're doing 600 damage at tier 5, that's legitimately pretty reasonable. It's probably not awesome, but it's above
you
average.
know what that just made me think of though?
Hmm.
Just wait till that guy keeps playing his tier fives with the extra hit points and does more damage and can't figure it out.
Right, right, right.
That'll
But,
his brain will go.
but this is great because what this is going to give us both an opportunity to talk to him on the forums about why that's
Yeah,
wrong,
yeah,
and maybe if he does, even if he doesn't learn, maybe someone else will. So
yeah, man, yeah. All right, so we've touched on it a little bit, but and I asked this of almost everybody. What is your process or ideology or thoughts on improving? How do you go about it when you look at your own gameplay? How just let it roll, or do you actually have a process, or what do you do?
so definitely have a process, and I think at least all of the other so in sort of the higher end clans in which I've been, so and those
Right.
are the Live and You, Joe. I don't think I know anybody that doesn't like even if let me think of the right way to say it. So even if they don't have a rigorously defined process where they've really thought like, okay, my process is X number of steps, they have, if you talk to them and about how they approach gameplay, they clearly have one, even if they can't articulate it perfectly. And
Right,
so I
right.
certainly do. um, and some of it, I like what you said about the phases of the game, because I think that was one of the early on, that was one of the biggest things to learn, right? Is I want to say maybe we were writing an article about this at one point. So the most important 60 seconds of the game are the 30 seconds that the timer is counting down,
Yeah.
and the initial 30 seconds of what you do, right? And just learning that, right? That early game, like, don't just drive out in the open, right? Don't start firing your gun somewhere where it's going to mean you get lit. Even when you start there, right? That's a simple point. Okay, so now I've gotten through the early game. Okay, so now I'm in the mid game. Okay, well, what kind of tank am I in? Where can I go to exercise the most leverage? So those are, so that time oriented part is definitely a piece, and that's one of the places where I started. And I think for beginners, if we assume that you know the very basics, like, what does hull down mean, what does side scraping mean, generically, how does the vision system and the spotting system work? Like, once you've gotten those, I think then you think about, okay, phases of the game, initial deployment, leveraging my gun in the middle game, when to and when to retreat. I think is one of the hardest things to get people to, to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sticking in a
Yeah.
position, and so all
Yeah.
those things. Yeah,
I
so
call them
those
unforced errors.
right, right.
Do
That's a
do
perfect
not
word for it.
commit unforced errors, which are typically overextended or leaving myself in a bad position that's going south and not knowing to retreat or reposition.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So for me, so I guess I should answer your first question, and then I'll
Yeah.
answer your second question. So the process of improvement is, so initially, and I think this even came from Watt Labs, was especially if you die early, don't leave the battle, right? Stay and watch the battle. Think about, okay, did I die early because I just got unlucky, right? And the enemy team
Happens.
did something right. Happens. The enemy team derped 4 tanks to a spot that nobody ever did. One game in a
Yeah.
thousand. That's going to happen.
Or just
Fine. I'll throw it
outplayed you.
away.
Just plain old
Right.
outplayed you.
Right,
Happens.
or
Yeah.
or just
Yeah.
outplayed you. Like, that happens. There's lots of better players in the game than me. Like,
Yep.
I, I that that's it's definitely something. But maybe I went to a bad position. Maybe I didn't read the deployment correctly. Maybe I didn't read the enemy team composition correctly in a spot that ordinarily would have been a good idea for my tank and my, and my tier. Maybe that wasn't a good decision.
Right.
So I think that that immediate feedback loop, that's step one of the improvement process, right? And so don't just, oh, I'm going to get it. And I think actually that ties even in with the capping to win versus doing other things, right?
Yeah.
The cap to win is that sort of very immediate, well, let's just get this game over with and learn and get into another game as fast as I can, right? And that's fine. Like I have absolutely no argument with people that don't want to do that and they want to move on. Hey, I don't care. Like, in fact, if I'm on the enemy team, I love that you want to do that, right? Because if you sit on the cap, it tells me exactly where you are
Yes.
when I'm ready to come kill you. So
That's
please sit there.
Yep.
That means I have one less gun to fight, and I have all these other things to do. But right, so that
Actionable
that's
intelligence right there.
right.
Yep.
It's perfect actionable intelligence. So there's that initial, like, okay, in the immediate game, think about what I did. What else could I have done? And then it was adding, okay, now over a series of, let's say, 50 to 100 games, right? Pick the, and you should always have your replays turned on, right? Because there's no reason
Absolutely.
not to turn your
Yeah.
replays on. So after let's say you played for a couple days, but be thinking, keeping track. If you can't do this in your head, write it down. But most people can do it in their head. So you're going to have games. So looking at your really bad games, not very interesting. Looking at your really good games, most of the time, not very. I mean, it's fun, but it's not educational for the most part. Keep track of the 3 to 5 games in a sequence of 50 to 100. There are going to be 3 to 5 games where you did okay, but you feel like you could have done better, but you're not sure how, or you could have won the game, but something happened and you didn't.
Right.
And when I would do, in fact, when I do coaching with people, that's the first thing that I ask them for, right? Is, send me a replay that fits those parameters, where you had an okay game, but you feel like there was more that I could have done, but I don't know what it was. And sit down and watch that replay, and particularly watch it with a very critical eye, and watch it in 30-second chunks, right? And what you want to be playing in your head was, okay, let's compare the decision that I had to make in the moment in real time versus now I have the opportunity to stop every 30 seconds or something and look at the mini map and look at the health point pools, right? And think about, okay, do I still agree with that decision that I made, or should I have done something else? Could I have, again, coming right back to what you were saying about phases of the game and preserving your vote, right? Perfect example, right? If you traded early, should I really have done that, right? Did I get value for my trade, or
Yep.
should I have maybe just spotted instead of trying to take that shot myself? Should I have poked somewhere else that was less likely to earn me a shot to the face in return? So that piece gets added, and then I think with those two, right, that's most of your. If you follow those two pieces semi-religiously, you're gonna end up eventually no worse than teal or blue kind of recent
Yeah.
area.
I agree with that 100%. I tell people I can make you blue.
Right.
I can 100% guarantee green.
Yep.
I think if you do what I'm saying, you honestly actually do what I'm saying, I can get you to blue.
Right.
The other thing, I got a lot of older gamers that are in my community, and sometimes there's
Right.
just physical limitations, man.
Sure.
There's equipment, there's your internet, there's just stuff that
Right.
it's a big package. But as far as just decision making in the game, one thing you said I thought was interesting, and I'm going to disagree slightly, but with a reason. You said,
Sure.
and I think we're agreeing. You said the very bad or very good games are uninteresting. I think that what you said, the close games are where you're going to do the most learning. I sometimes like to get people's very good games and very bad games,
Mhm.
and especially in the case of very good games, we're going to get some really esoteric, small learning points out of it. Where
Yes, that's very
this
true.
little tiny thing you did wrong, you could have got one more shot out of it. You could have done one little, and you don't want to spend all your time on stuff like that. But very good players often, when you have another good player look at their game and it's a Mount Monster game, you have a
Yep.
couple other good players look at it and they could go, "Hey man, that's great, but did you notice you did this here?" And they go, "Oh shit, I left a shot on the table, or I took a hit I
Yep.
didn't get, or whatever."
No, I think I would agree with that completely, and I would say that's sort of the next. So once you get into
That's that
that,
master's level
right.
thing.
So
Yeah.
that like the teal or blue, no, you're 100% right. And then right for me now, that's typically what I will do. Like I will still look at the ones where I feel like I did okay, I could have done better,
Yeah.
but exactly that, right? I will go through. Let's say it's a 7,500 damage game. It's like okay, now I'm not looking for the low hanging fruit, but now I'm looking. Did every single time I poked my turret, why did I do it? And
Right.
was it the right reason?
Yeah.
Right. And like you
Yeah.
say, you're not going to find a ton, but sure, if I hand it, to some other, to some really deep purple dude,
Yeah.
they're going to say, yeah, that was mostly good, but right here you exposed when you didn't need to.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
here you had free shots on this
Yeah.
mouse for a couple shots, right? And that'll happen for everyone. And
Because that's
that's
the level of those super unicoms. I'm not one. I don't think you are either stats wise. I occasionally have a game that's like that, like everybody does, but it's the consistency. Sometimes
right,
I watch those guys, and and even me, I'm good at breaking it down. It's what I did my whole career. I understand debriefing, I understand breaking things down, finding learning
right,
points. But holy cow, sometimes you look at it and it's just this natural. They've worked on it, so I'm not saying it's just magic that
right,
they just have
right,
it, but it's pretty impressive. Now here's my problem with what you just said.
right.
You never once blamed anybody else. What the heck, man? I thought it
Well,
was
and this
I thought it was RNG, or it was Wargaming's evil. It was
I mean, it's all of that's understood as the undertone
oh,
of the
okay,
entire.
that's
Like I would be I would be 5K recent if it weren't for RNG.
oh, clearly,
But
clearly. You
but no,
look like a 5K recent guy. I mean,
right,
look, I
right.
mean, both of us aren't we just both we just all right.
That's
So
right.
what's your favorite conspiracy theory?
I, for me, I think it's got to be the cheats and the accusations. Right,
Yeah,
is by far my favorite. Right, and I think for a couple reasons. Number one. And this is not to say that it doesn't exist, because Wargaming has managed to catch and ban
sure. Yeah,
a small, very small minority of people who
it can
actually do.
happen and not be a big
Right,
deal. That's a
right,
possibility. Yeah,
right. But I think that the biggest thing to me about it, and why it's my favorite, right, is that it betrays a total misunderstanding of what's important about the game. And I like I really so I liked a couple. I mean, much of what you've said, I resonates very strongly with me. But a couple things. So number one, at some point on the forums very recently, you were talking about, and it might even been the same post we were talking about earlier, where you talked about attitude. Like if you don't work on yourself first, right, you will basically never get better at this game. So
right.
that's
If you can't
that's
be honest with yourself, you there's
right,
it's a non-starter. You're going
right,
nowhere,
right, right. Wherever you are is where you will be, and that's where you will stay.
and
Right,
you'll be
but I
angry
think
the whole time.
right, and you'll be angry the whole time. But the other is that you were talking about having older gamers. Obviously, I'm one. I'm in my 40s. A lot of the people that were in Villain and UJ, I want to say that the age range in those clans is probably something like 15 to 70.
Yeah,
And that's not a joke. I mean, we had and those are all people. Basically, you're talking purple to dark purple recents or better, right? So it's not a Twitch shooter, right? It has, especially with the introduction of the EBRs, it has more twitchy
right,
elements, but it's at its core, it's not a Twitch shooter, and so that's why you're hacking, or you've got Warpack, or you've got something else, right? Well, I mean, and even honestly, like the premium ammo, like, oh, you're using gold ammo, you just pen everything. Well, like, none of those things are true, right? You could have Warpack, and you could have full premium loadout, full food, everything on your tank, and I can still beat you 100% of the time if you play
right,
stupid. Like,
right.
and honestly, not even if you play stupidly, right? All you have to do is play kind of thoughtlessly, and I can win that fight 95% of the time. And to me, that number one, that's why that's my favorite conspiracy theory, because it's
Yeah,
just it's
yeah.
so hilarious. Like, and people are, oh, like, go watch top streamers. Like, half of them play on a vanilla client. They don't even use mods to to show what the XPM scores are of other players, let
I
alone
don't.
beat
I've
them.
been vanilla for almost 3 years now.
Right, right. Basically, until they pulled all the once they pulled all the sort of the quality of life mods into the main client, yeah, I don't think I run the Marks of Excellence extended
Yeah,
mod because
that's
like,
actually yeah.
right,
There's still
I'll
some
try
creature
that.
comforts that are nice, but I got
Right,
tired of
but
chasing it. So
right,
yeah,
exactly. It's just not worth it. So from that perspective, I find that's by far my favorite, right? Because it just so fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the game, and it's very rewarding, right? Because like I'm sure you've had this too, right? But what feels better than like I did nothing special, right? All I did was I understood the map, I understood my team, I understood what my tank was good at, and maybe if we're talking about really super dark purpley, I'm really good at micro positioning in a game, right? And you get the message, and I love that all chat is back, by the way, because getting those messages after the battle is great. Getting them during the battle, you will be reported to Wargaming. Thanks for hacking replays, and like that, that's music to your ears, right? Because what it
Yeah.
means is someone else got outplayed so thoroughly that they don't even believe it was possible for someone to be as good a player as you are, at least in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And to me, like that's the feedback that makes you want to improve, right? Because it's like, wow, I was so good at this game that someone thought I was cheating. Like,
Yeah.
what better compliment is there?
That one, and I personally have a hard time wrapping my mind around it based on what I've done in my life, and performing at a high level, flying airplanes is what I did,
Right,
and there were guys who were even better than me by far, and but my point of that is that take anything you do in your life, that's your hobby, a sport you like, your work, whatever, and look at the guys that are at the top level. How do you come to the conclusion that everyone doing something better than you is somehow cheating,
right,
or doing it? While the fact is some are, the other fact is some people are just putting the time in, man.
right,
That's all it is. It's a pixel tank game. Let's not get too crazy.
right,
We're having a really serious conversation about a bloody pixel tank game, and that's cool.
right,
That we live in a place in the world right now that we can do that, and we can take some of these real world things and kind of put them into our pixel tank game. And while we understand that it's a pixel tank game, you can still apply that stuff to it to get better. And
right.
sometimes I just can't wrap my mind around people who don't do that. That's a little bit foreign to me. So I have to often step back a little bit and go, okay, this guy's or gal is coming at it from a different angle than I am. I can't just come off the top rope and bring the atomic elbow on them and
Right.
tell them they suck and they'll never get better. But at the same time, a little bit of honesty goes a long way, man.
Well, and and to like to right to kind of bring the discussion full circle back to the forums, I think that's why I take generally I won't say I'm never snarky on the official forum, but I
Well,
try not
yeah,
to be,
right.
and I try to genuinely like even until you prove to me that you're either just a troll or you're so unwilling to change your viewpoint that it's pointless. I will genuinely try to explain, not argue really, but to explain like,
Yeah,
look, that isn't a good way to look at it. Try looking at it this way, and you'll have a more productive. And I think we talked about reasons to love the game. I think that's the other one, right? Is that so for you, coming from the military and flying fighter jets, right? Which has got to be an incredibly precise and practice oriented and mental game oriented thing. And
yeah.
for me in the real world, and I have other things, but for me, racing cars, like, and there's a great phrase like, everyone behind me is an incredible driver, everyone ahead of me is cheating, right?
Well,
And
dude,
that's
that's okay. So I didn't know that
right,
about you. That's
yeah,
fantastic. It's this. It's basically the same thing.
right,
Your professional effort in what are dangerous kinds of things like that. They matter because if you make a big mistake racing a car, you get hurt, or you hurt someone else, or you both get
right,
hurt. That
right,
matters. You know what I
right,
mean? So you take
right,
some
right.
of that very serious stuff, you bring it in a pixel tank game, and we can really leverage that and get a lot better at it. What do you
Right.
race, man?
So I've raced a bunch of stuff throughout my career. Lots of mid '90s BMW 3 Series sedan, some Acura Integra, some other various little. I think I raced an Acura Legend at one point. Started in a like early '90s Nissan Sentra with about 90 horsepower, which
So
was hilarious.
time trials or rally or what?
No, pure road course, both
Yeah,
sprint and endurance racing. So like
that is so cool.
30 minutes single driver, or up to 24-hour team of multiple drivers, doing the whole thing. So it's
That is awesome, man.
but but again, like it it hits some of the same kind of things that tanks does, right?
Sure.
It's very it's very responsive to calculated practice and thoughtful engagement, right? It's really fun, and it's almost peaceful in a sense, right? Like if I'm in the car, right, I'm not thinking about my job, and I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm just thinking about there's my 1-year-old daughter going that way in the
Yeah,
hallway,
yeah,
and she gets mad if I don't wave at her, so we'll give her the wave. But but you get a calmness almost from it because I have one job to do. Just like you say, it's one that if I don't give my full attention to it, I could be seriously hurt or killed, right?
right.
And now, of course, in tanks, my tank gets blown up, but okay, so I step the level, the total focus level down a little bit, but even a level or two down from that, that same level of focus gives very, very rewarding results. And yeah, like, if I'm having a really good game, if I'm playing a tank I like on a map I like, that's super calm and kind of zen
Yeah.
and pleasant, right? That's the best way
I
I
mean,
feel.
that's great you brought that up too, because it really does apply to the game, in the sense of it is your fault. All right, if you
Right,
do poorly, if you're racing a car, flying a jet, if something goes wrong, the only person you can control is you.
right,
All right. If there are outside environmental things or unlucky stuff, or the other driver just drove fast, that happens. Same thing in tanks. Somebody plays
right.
better or whatever. But if you're looking to improve yourself and not go crazy blaming everything, you have got
Yep.
to internalize that everything I do is I'm going to say my fault. That's not really what I'm saying, but it is
Or my
up to me,
responsibility,
my
right?
responsibility. Yes.
And my opportunity. And I think there was a great racing quote from Jackie Stewart about how it's not always possible to be the best, but it's always possible to improve your own performance.
Yes. It's a fine motor car.
That's right. That's right. And, but the same is true with tanks, right? Because even games that I win and do really well, like we were talking about with the replay reviews, right? Even those I probably didn't. And even I could go find Carbon Ward or Zero or Skill, right? Even they're really, really, really good games, which are better than my really, really good games for
Sure. Yeah.
sure. Even that's not a perfect game, right? There was something that they could have done better, and I think that's the key, right? Is that the other players around you, you can't. Actually, it reminds me of a good thing to talk about. So I think there's one of the things that I think particularly bad players will get mad at good players for doing is using them as a meat shield, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like there's a sense in which that isn't true, but there's a sense in which that is true, right? But I think the sense in which it is true is one that you actually shouldn't be mad about, because if I say I'm using you as a meat shield, what that really means is that you did something. Dumb is the wrong word. Maybe it's just inexperienced, but you made a play that was not a good play.
And
But
I
from
will
my
take advantage
perspective,
of it if I
right,
can.
right,
Yeah.
or and from and even I would say not even so much take advantage of, but my job as your teammate is to make the best possible use of the dumb play that you just made,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And it might be that maybe maybe the smartest play is to drive in front, eat a shot for you, and save your tank. But maybe the smartest play, particularly if I'm in a high DPM, high rate of fire tank, maybe you're going to die, but maybe three enemies are going to blow their camo to shoot at you. Okay,
Right.
so now I can keep three enemies lit, I can track two of them, and I can make sure that my teammates kill them. Well, I used you as a meat shield in that I elected not to save you, because the best thing for our team was not to save you, but was to make some use of the fact that you had decided to trade your health in that
Right.
way.
Yep. Yep. All right. So let's get into some of the controversial stuff. We'll kind of rapid fire this. Artie.
Excellent.
Artie.
Ooh, love hate relationship with it. They love me, I hate them. No, that's totally tongue in cheek. Um, I feel like the transition of Artie over the course of the game has generally been good.
I would agree
I
with that. Yeah.
I don't love it in pubs, but I can tolerate it. And I think one of the things about becoming a higher echelon player is simply learning how to accept that sometimes it's going to follow you. I'm just going to make myself as annoying to hit as I can. But truth be told, if I convince 3RD to shoot at me as a low tier light tank on Prokhorovka, despite what it might do to my damage per game stats or kill per game stats, it's probably a win, right? Because that means they're not hitting the giant
Right.
clump of my heavies on the one line. They're
Yeah.
not hitting my mediums that are up on the hill doing vision. So, how mad am I going to get about that, really? And I think the transition from massive alpha to lower alpha but stun was the right direction. I feel like, and I think the thing I even might have argued for on the forums long ago was I would have rather see it turn into more of a direct support class. and I would have liked to see something like the return of an AP shell that would do something like same tier heavy tank
Right.
alpha,
Yeah.
but is an AP shell. So if you miss, it does nothing. But that's perfect for slowly digging out a hull down super call, right, or a chieftain,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because you can hit them in a way that other tanks can't do, and they can't just sit invulnerable hull down. Or you get the stun shell, which does relatively low damage but has this area of effect and lets you get and lets you get assist damage. So I'm okay with where it is. I feel like it could be made into a more team oriented thing than it is right now, but I'm
Right.
kind of okay with it. I would probably like two rather than three, because I feel like three, especially if they happen to focus the same target, like, yeah, I can win a game while you do that to me. Is that a fun game for me? Absolutely not. Right.
Yeah. Three tier 10 arties is very, very, very painful. All right.
Right.
So that being said, do you run anonymous or no?
I have turned on the anonymizer. I've experimented with turning it on and off.
Do you think it
Uh,
really matters? What's your thoughts on?
I would say that it definitely matters. What's different, at least in terms of the arty focus for me, if I have it on, some people will just shoot at what they think are anonymized people regardless, but it's definitely less than the dark purple focus that you get,
Okay.
and or the clan tag focus. And the other thing is that it definitely follows you on the map less. So if I have it turned off, I will definitely have the one game in 15 or 20 where every RD piece just follows me around the map wherever
Yeah.
I go, and they will take whatever shot they have, no matter how bad it is. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if I have it turned off, I mostly only get shot by RD when I'm in a place where I should roughly expect, based on the map, to be
Right. Right.
shot at by RD.
All right. Wheeled tanks. Let me rephrase that slightly. Wheel
Right.
tanks as they are mech'd. I am glad different content's coming in. I don't care if it has
Right.
wheels or tracks. Doesn't matter to me.
Right.
The way they're mech'd is my issue. But anyway, not to spoil your answer. What's your thoughts on that?
I think I would have exactly the same answer as you. So I'm okay with it in theory. I think probably the top speeds are too high for the server, for the way the server is implemented. Like the really
Yeah,
top
I would
tier.
agree with that. Without any real technical knowledge, I just feel like it's not able to handle it. The engine.
Right.
I'm
Just
talking out my rear end. I know that. I don't have any specific technical
well,
knowledge of that. It just seems like it's not able to handle it. I don't know.
and particularly, I think it number one, it takes the game from being a deliberate shooter to a Twitch shooter, which I'd rather not do.
Yes.
Selfishly, because I'm not awesome Twitch, but I think
Right.
unselfishly because there are tons of Twitch. Like, if I wanted a Twitch shooter, there's lots of those around. I can
Right.
go find
You
another
can
one.
go
Right.
360 no scope all day long in 15 different games.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Easy to do. I mean, that said, they are a very high skill. They're a low skill floor, high skill ceiling tank, right?
Sure.
If you want to be really good at them, you do genuinely have to be an amazing player. But sort of the combination of the mobility. Well, so I'd say I have a couple things that I strongly dislike about them. One is the auto aim assistant,
That's
because
got to go.
and I think from wargaming experience, well, they're fast, it's hard to hit. Well, yes, but the speed is your armor, right?
Right.
So that armor should come with a downside. The downside is it's harder to move your mouse and click right on the red tank.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're giving them directly an additional bonus on top of the speed armor that they
An
already
additional
get.
bonus. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of silly, right? That I don't like. The way the wheels are modeled as armor, probably not appropriate, right? They probably, like, if anything is going to hit the hull, it probably, like, whether there's a wheel there or not, probably just needs to.
Did you see the Q&A? The answer on the Q&A?
I saw a little bit about that, but I didn't
Yeah.
read it in depth. So
Not to interrupt you too much, but generally,
Right,
basically the idea was, well, those wheels are really thick metal wheels, so they would act like armor. Like, okay, got it. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Right. So that's bad. Um, the level of mobility when they are at top speed is, effectively they're not accepting the same physics engine that
Yeah.
everyone else has to deal with.
They don't roll over.
Right. For the same reason that Artie can be bad for gameplay, they can be bad, right? Like, Artie is tough to deal with because it gets to play by a different set of rules, right?
Right.
And I kind of view
Yeah.
that the same thing happens there. And then the other is, so they have all these other things that they do, and I like the idea of an active scout, right? That can really genuinely do that job, because that's been something that the game has missed. But then, okay, well, why does it get what's effectively a better Hesh round than every other light tank
Yeah.
in the game? Like,
Yeah.
you've made it. you've made it the bane of slow moving stuff because it's really fast, it's hard to hit, and it can spot well. But now you've also made it the bane of all the other light tanks because I was recently playing the LHMTV a lot, and then you end up fighting the EBR premium, and you end up fighting the Lynx, and it's like, well, this is pointless, right? I get 230 alpha every 9 seconds. This thing gets a Hesh round that pens me basically every time it shoots me. So, and it can shoot me every 6 seconds for twice my alpha, right? Or take the tier 10. I was playing a gorilla the other day, and I had one of the tier 10 ones drive up over a hill, auto aim, hit me for like 560 damage, and disappear over the hill before I couldn't even turn my turret. Like, okay, I mean, fair play to him. He's leveraging what the tank can do, but I'm not sure that a tank that can do that, number one, doesn't mesh with the others, and I don't know that that's a good direction for the gameplay. So long answer to a short question.
They need to be. Well, there's multiple things they need to have happen. One of my biggest issues you already touched on is the mobility and the fact that they don't get slowed down. The idea of tracking something was so fundamentally basic to the game, and then they just took that whole mechanic and they shit canned it. Right, and now it doesn't exist. And supposedly they slow down, but not really. You have to hit the outside wheels, and you have to get them a couple times. And when they do really slow down, okay, they are vulnerable, but that's really hard to do.
Right, and even then, like they're vulnerable by being the same speed as a tracked light tank would be, right? Which, I mean, it's better than it was, but it's not, unless you knock out lots of wheels, they're not really slow. They're just slower than they would be otherwise.
Yeah, they get a little bit slower. Yeah. Okay, so skill-based matchmaking.
Bad idea, and I think there's or at least for random battles, bad idea. It effectively, that's the way ranked battles work, and the trouble with those is that most of the time when I sit down to play, I don't want to have to be at 100% of mental effort every time I sit down to play in every tank I sit down to play in. So I think the things that's skill-based matchmaker will create all of the same problems that make ranked not a whole lot of fun, right? Number one, unless you're even a much better player than me, you're only going to play the most meta tanks because
you have to. Sure.
You have to, right? I mean, why would I bring why would I bring a Chinese 1-2-1, right?
That's what every skill-based game devolves to. Whatever the game is, if it's an RTS, there's a certain build pattern. If it's a, it all devolves to, and that's what humans are good at doing.
Right.
Race car drivers, they find the right line. That's the line. You're not going to make a new line, dude. It may change for your car and the race and the conditions and everything else, but there is indeed a best line to run on.
That's right. And so so the skill-based matchmaker does it strongly encourages that you only play the most meta tanks. And ranked had some good ways of trying to alleviate that. Both awarding experience based on a role, which, I mean, we could talk about why an M48 and a 430U are the same role of medium.
Oh, that drove me crazy.
That's kind of funny, but we'll leave that to the side. So there was that. There were the bonus battles that applied only once per night to the tank. So if you wanted to do a bunch of them, you needed to play some variety. But even then, like, there's enough meta tanks that you could probably, unless you were really amazing, you could chew through all of your bonus battles in one night by playing each of the meta tanks.
Right.
I don't like it from that perspective, and honestly, it doesn't fix. So it would make all the battles less diverse, and I don't think it fixes the problem that anybody's complaining about, right?
Yeah.
Because the problem is, well, I don't feel like, and it comes back to responsibility, right? And inward focus. Like, what you're saying is that I don't want to have to get better to have a 50% win rate, right?
Yeah.
I want the matchmaker to give me a 50% win rate. Well, okay, but then we're going to look at some other stat, because the win rate won't matter, right? The win rate will be, I'll have to play some other 3600 reach.
This is what is never talked about with this, because that's what humans do, right? They want to measure things, and if you bring all the win rates to an even tighter tolerance, as a matter of fact, what will really happen is, I'm a 52.7% win rate, because that will be definitively and objectively better than a 57.1 win rate.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right now that's kind of in the noise, but if you go to skill based, like, then okay, now we're going to look at tenths of a percentile win rate difference.
Yeah, I won the race by 0.01 second.
Right.
Well, that's the difference, right?
I won, right? No, no,
Yeah,
I think that's I think it's bad from that perspective, and it takes away, I think, it it would make, I think, a lot of the stuff that they do, like, even something like Marks of Excellence, right? Well, if the matchmaker is no longer random, well, does that even really work the same way? I think lots of the
sure,
other
yeah,
things, almost every other system of measurement in the game and things that they do, right? All of those would be affected by a change to skill-based matchmaking, and not in predictable ways necessarily, or ways that everybody would like.
yeah.
And so for that reason, like, I like that there is a mode available for that. Ranked is good for that. I've played most of the seasons of Ranked. I've done okay, and then
I'd like to see it go with different tiers.
yeah. Well, so one of the things, like, if you ask me, Juris, what are your long-term wishes for the game? What would you
Let me
like to
ask
see?
you, Juris, what are your long-term wishes for the game?
So it's funny you should ask me that. So I would say a couple things. Like, number one, the low and mid tier. Number one, I would say huge credit to Wargaming right now for changing the health point pools
Yeah, I think that's a good
to
deal.
improve the low and mid tier.
Yeah,
I wrote a actually, that was the most recent long post that I wrote, was so I I both because I was platooning with some new players and some players that were returning to the game after a long layoff. I was playing mid tiers in a way that I don't ordinarily do, and there was a tank that I'd won long ago on a new player stream that I used to help out with and coach. I had the M4 improved, and I was like, well, you know what? I'll take this opportunity. I'll go 3 mark the M4 improved, and I'll see, what's the state of mid tier gameplay. And
yeah,
I came away with that from that with a bunch of things that I thought could be improved. One, which I say, big credit to Wargaming for fixing the health point pools. I think that's gonna so credit to them for that. But I think that's addressing the symptom, not the disease. So one of the other things I'd like to see them focus on is, for like, the low tiers, not so much because you go through them so fast, it doesn't matter. But tiers 4 to 6, right? Right now, I think the unholy combination is bad gun handling and availability of binoculars. Because what those two things do together is they give a tremendous advantage to defenders in static positions, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
that's why the T67 has always been such an outlier, and it's why it's hard to play aggressively in, because for me, coming from, the tier 8, 9, 10 world, that was the biggest thing. And I expected some level of having to adjust my gameplay going into it. I had to adjust it even more than I had anticipated in order to be roughly successful at the same win rates. And the biggest reason was that it's incredibly hard to play aggressively at all and learn that play style in those tiers, because the gun handling is so bad that if you've been moving and your enemy has not, the chances that you'll hit them are
yeah,
basically nil, right? I mean,
yeah. That's a good point. Yeah,
you're praying for that.
yeah,
And because the view ranges are relatively low, the bonus of having binoculars up and running means that, you can spot tanks, you can even burn through camo after 445, and you're playing against moving tanks that can't even spot anything after 400, right?
sure,
And
yeah,
you're gonna lose all the time. And so I would like to see, like, similar to the hit point buff, I would like to see a relative gun handling buff to bring the gun handling on those tanks, like, not to the level of the 7s through 10s, but much closer to it, because
closer.
I think
Okay,
that would help.
yeah,
And then the other thing that I thought would be good would be to replace things like the binocs and the camo net with, let's say there's like a category of basic equipment that's, and we've already got improved equipment in the game versus standard. So, why not create something like basic equipment that's, that is freely mountable, or let's say it's mountable and dismountable for credits rather than gold or bonds.
sure, yeah,
But let's say it gives you half of the relative bonus of standard equipment, and get rid of the pieces that give you a bonus for sitting still, because sitting still behind a bush, like, almost every change to tank destroyers that's ever been made in the game, right, was probably made to relatively discourage the behavior of sitting in a bush station, like the
that may
original.
decrease some of the uh, seal clubbing idea too at the tier 4 to 6.
Right.
If
And
they don't have such a gigantic advantage from equipment, the equipment's toned down a little bit, so there's less of a difference between it. Although
right. And I think that would be, for me, that would be a big thing,
yeah, yeah,
what I would see for the game long term. And I think, I think the other would be at the very highest tiers. Like honestly, I would happily give back my 907. I would happily give back my Chieftain if it meant better balance between the tanks at those tiers. It's just
Could you imagine though if
I
they
know,
attempted that? I mean, I
right?
appreciate your magnanimity, whatever I'm trying to say, right
Magnanimity,
there.
right?
But yeah, this is a problem. It's a big problem, and I don't know what the solution is because these things are clearly overpowered. All the good players, not all the good players, generally good to great players have them. That exacerbates the issue with
Right,
them, and they're not going to get nerfed because Wargaming probably doesn't want to go through the pain of doing that.
right,
So now they're talking about things like matchmaker limitations and not allowing them into some of these other modes. So people went to get them so they could do well in these modes. So now, oh, I'm going to go get my reward tank, but I can't play it in the mode because it's overpowered. Oh my gosh, that's what a disaster.
right, right. And I think it was a bad road to go down. And for something like the 907, I honestly, in some ways, I don't even know why, because, for example, the old Object 430, I actually really liked it. It was an interesting, different take on a tier 10 Russian medium, right? It,
Yeah,
it, it had some definite downs. It was it wasn't in some ways you could argue it was the weakest of the three of the original ones, but it was unique, right? It had better though not impenetrable frontal armor,
right.
which meant that for example, it was a good bat chat killer, right? Because if you had a bat chat that was trying to circle you, if you could just kind of keep your frontal armor pointed at him and he was auto aiming you with APCR,
You could expect some bounces.
right, a good
Yeah,
50% of those were going to bounce, and you had a lot of DPM, so you might it was a perfect bat chat hunter, right? It had good camo in a way that the others didn't, so it was different, but it wasn't overpowered. And like if something like that had turned into the 907, I think nobody would care, right?
yeah, yeah.
So but then things like there was my least favorite tier 10 eras are probably the Type 5 overbuff era, right? And the mouse overbuff era, because I can remember playing Clan Wars where every strat on any city map was just like, let's have 15 of these, and they get, or even trying to break those, right?
Yeah.
When at the Type 5 overbuff,
Oh, the
you could just
110E5 overbuff. That was another.
right,
That
right, right.
was insane. Yeah,
Right, where the cupola was unpennable, right?
yeah.
Well, it's like a super conqueror except with heat instead of APCR as the
Right.
premium route, right.
Yep.
There's not much you can do with it. And then like the V4, where like there's just no justification for a tank to have, and writ smaller. That's the problem with the EBR, right? Is that
Yeah.
a tank shouldn't have all of those upsides without downsides that balance it. And
Yeah,
so
the V4 was an outlier, but unfortunately, it is the poster child for the balance issues, right? So on the
right,
one hand, you can say, well, it was an outlier; they're not all that bad. But on the other hand, that's what we keep getting, even though that's the worst one we've seen in a long time. It's the same idea. Nearly everybody who looked at the stats went, you cannot release that into the game, and
right,
they did, right?
right,
And that's not always true. I have a
right,
big argument about the Brit lights. I happen to like them. They're actually doing fine stats wise. They're not the
right,
best thing that ever was released, but the stats looked bad, and everyone said they're bad. Well, people were kind of wrong. But in the case of the 268 version 4, nobody was wrong.
right,
It was an awful addition to the game, man. And oh, by the way, it's still number one,
right,
even
right.
in
It's just not
recents.
right, just not
Yeah,
just right, just not by as much as it was.
right. It's at the top. Whether you go by last 30 days, if you look at its total stats, then that's taking into the bad era when it was super good. But look at the
Right,
recents; it's still number one.
right,
I looked at the nerf and I went, "That's clearly not enough." But they're from now on going to hang their hat on that and say, "We nerfed it. It's good." Well, it's not.
right,
It's still slightly overpowered, guys. But
right,
whatever.
right, right. Whatever. We'll live with that. So
Yeah,
those
yeah,
are,
yeah,
I would say, those two things are my biggest. But
yeah.
and like I said, to their credit, they started working on the mid tiers in a way that I think is really good for new player retention, and good for that experience. So I hope that means at some point they're going to figure out that crazy overbuff tier 10s. And hopefully, I guess the thing that I do feel good about, with like the 907 and the Chief, like they aren't tanks that anybody paid money for, so there won't be the complaint about, oh hey, this is a real money tank, you can't
Right.
change it. Like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
can.
There will be
They
the
have,
complaints about, hey, I put all this time into it. Good players
right,
deserve this, all that kind of thing, which they're valid complaints. Most time when
right,
and going back to the forum, most time when I look in there, in the form of the complaints, there's a level of truth to all of the things that the conspiracy guys and the complainers and everything. There is a level of truth to that, and from both sides, from good players and bad players. But I think if people open their aperture up a little bit more and are willing to accept that it's possible to be both of something sometimes, then you can still be on one side or the other. But if at least you can open it up and go, okay, I see that there's some truth there, but here's why I believe my position is the correct one. We could
Right.
go a long ways towards getting along a little better in there. But it at the end of the day, sometimes it's fun to watch the crazy
Yes, it is.
to go on. Oh man,
That's the other part of the forum, right? Like, sometimes I like to contribute, and sometimes I like to just watch the world burn from behind my keyboard. Right?
you can almost always tell unless it's somebody trying to be ironic in the title. That a lot of times I'll go to it based on the time, like, oh, here we go again, man.
Right. Here it is. Right here it is.
Well, hey, Juris, man, I appreciate you coming by. I always ask this
My
everybody.
pleasure.
So this is the parting shot from Juris. Give us some Juris wisdom. Doesn't it could be about racing, could be about tanks, whatever.
Right. So the piece from racing is the most important thing in any driving that you ever do is your eyes. Wherever you look, that's where the car will go. So look where you want to go. Don't look at the thing. Don't look at what you don't want to hit. Right. If you look at something, you'll hit it. So
That's right.
and same wisdom applies to tanks. Right. Like, look at what you want to do. Don't think about what you don't want to do. And I think for tanks, the parting shot is that there's play for fun and there's play to win. But for me, I have way more fun when I win, right?
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
you can still play for fun, but somewhere in there, if you turn a little bit of your learning brain on, you're going to have more fun over the long run than if you don't. Like, if your only desire is to get into a Type 5 and press RRR and just drive out into the middle and shoot at stuff, that's going to get boring, right? At some point, you're going to get bored with what happens there.
you're not even gonna press W. Just going
Right,
straight to
right,
RRR.
right. Don't care where it's pointed. If it's pointed at the lake, we're driving into the
That's
lake.
right. That's,
But think about adding just a little bit of critical analysis to what you're doing, because even a little bit compounded over 10,000 games makes a big difference. And I think when you and I are talking about, like, if you come do coaching with me or with you, like, if you are willing to engage at all, I agree 100% with what you said. I can guarantee I can make you a green player, and if you genuinely are really doing it, I can guarantee that you can be teal. Like, above that, then there's some Twitch skill that starts to matter. There's
right.
some how much of this you're doing that starts to matter. But there's no player in this game that can't be that good if you're willing to put a little of effort into,
There you go.
getting it.
There you go. All right, man. I really appreciate you coming by. Kind of stepped in and late notice, but this was awesome, man. This was great. Hopefully, we can get some
Pleasure.
more forum people in here, and we'll do some more of these things. Should be out on Wednesday. I'm going to sign off and say bye, Juris. Say goodbye to the people.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Guido. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. It was awesome.
All right, I am out.